everyone, and thanks for joining us for an American Ambulance Association webinar. Today's session is being co-presented with Women in Emergency Services. Happy EMS Week to everyone. The webinar is now being recorded. The on-demand archive will be posted to the AAA website within 48 hours of the live session. A link to the slides for today's session will be posted to the chat here shortly. And please hold questions until the end and use the Q&A chat feature. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Andrea Abbas. Andrea is an experienced EMS professional with a passion for people and operations. She enjoys guiding EMS agencies to identify, embrace, and live their organizational culture through creativity and efficiency, while cultivating a workplace that values high performance and longevity. With that, I give the floor to you, Andrea. Go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Kayla. As she presented, my name's Andrea Abbas. Happy EMS Week. I'm currently at our agency right now, bringing crews in to celebrate. So I hope you're enjoying the week. So this webinar is going to really focus on EMS wellness, but as we move through the content, you're going to see that this presentation is unlike any other. It's quite unique. Much of the content that's been developed is real-lived content and then science-backed research, peer-reviewed research. So I hope you enjoy this presentation and it prompts some thoughts on how we can bring a holistic approach to wellness in our EMS agencies. So with that, one of the things that I've been talking about quite a bit lately is, what if a career in EMS started differently? So what do I mean by that? Well, what if you showed up on day one for your EMT course or paramedic course, and we gave you some running shoes, some sweatpants, and the first hour of class was, we're going to go out and we're going to go for a run. And if you cannot run, we're going to walk. Or maybe it's, we're going to do yoga together, we're going to weight train together. And there was this element of physical fitness, but that element of physical fitness would translate into discipline, consistency, motivation, and lots of self-care and pride in what we're doing. So we've been talking a lot together as an agency about, what if it did start differently? What if instead of, when you do your driver's training, we hand out a bunch of pizza and we stop at Domino's and just get you some slices, and we gave you a salad and some fruit and some really nutritious food. I'm not trying to be critical here. I've grown up in EMS. I love this job, but I do notice as a culture, we kind of lean towards what's fast, what's convenient, and what's easy because we're in such a time crunch. So my question to you today is, what if it looked different? What if we slowed down a little bit and we really were mindful of how we start in the classroom, and when we finish in that classroom, what that translates to when you get into the agency and you get into the culture outside of the classroom. So this is a video. A couple years ago, I started creating a documentary. I wanted to record myself. I was currently working full-time as a field supervisor. I was on 24-hour shifts. I had inherited a dog, and her name was Tootsie. She was an amazing, amazing dog. And I was kind of traversing all of those challenges. We were busier than ever. This was post-COVID. So we also were traversing what many of us are traversing, is the staffing crisis and challenges when it comes to getting good people in our orgs. And I was starting to question my path. So I'm just going to play this video for you so you can kind of drop into this documentary that I was creating. If you look closely, I look a little bit tired. I had just gotten home from a 24-hour shift and I was having some thoughts. So here we go.
So day 2, I didn't do a lot of filming. This is just a busy day. I'm really torn on how honest I want to be on this documentary, but to be completely upfront, I've been thinking a lot about what my dad has always been telling me since I got into this industry. He's always told me I basically am being foolish, and I should be teaching, and I have an education, and I could have a much better schedule and much better pay, and why am I doing this? And some mornings, when I'm tired and I start to resent the industry, not my agency, but the industry as a whole, I start to wonder, if what I'm doing is really going to make a difference, and am I going to get to a stage in my career where I'm going to have a good schedule, like a schedule where I can have a family and have a dog. And I had to put my dog with the neighbor when I moved up here because I'm working a 24-hour schedule and it's rotating, and I can't find a sitter to come in and take care of the dog. So that's kind of a point of frustration for me. And really, I mean, the mindfulness project is really to pay attention, right, to the things that come up. And these are the things that are coming up for me today is, what am I doing? Am I going to progress? Am I going to be stuck, working 80 to 90 hours a week and not sleeping at night? Is this sustainable for somebody that is, got their education, got their things together, has spent their career working in this industry, and here we are. So a little food for thought. And another thing I wanted to kind of mention too is I did have a conversation today with somebody that was also frustrated, much younger than I am, but maybe all the wiser, that basically looked at me and said, I don't make enough money and I don't feel like this is going to work for me. And this person was sincerely considering going and working at McDonald's. It pays more, it's better schedule. And I thought, gosh, is this where we're at? Are these the conversations we're having? I mean, we got problems, right? So, but if those of us that care and really love this work, if we leave, what will happen? And I think that's my biggest concern. So I didn't meditate today. I didn't take time to really do much of anything. I was very focused on my task at hand. And once again, busy day. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed and hope for some good sleep. But a lot of honesty.
Okay, we can move on because then I just babble quite a bit. But as you can see, I'm tired and I'm, just going back and forth. But I did create a lot of videos during that time frame that are good reminders to look back and review. And I have to say, a lot of things really haven't changed. And I think our younger folks that are coming behind us are really teaching us a lot about, what's important when it comes to work, what's important when it comes to life balance. So with that, we'll get into more of that in just a bit. But this, I call this the Wheel of Insanity. And I actually created this on the back of a billing sheet in the middle of the night. I was feeling frustrated. Sometimes I feel really creative at work. Those that know me, I do a lot of blogging. I haven't had as much time lately to write some good blogs, but it's one of the things I really enjoy. It's an outlet for me. So I started writing in the middle of the night, and this is how the Wheel of Insanity was born. And as you can see, the wheel is all around operational demands. And if you look closely, my first career was in molecular biology. So this kind of looks like a cell cycle, if you guys know what one of those looks like. So that's kind of a running joke. Many of my wheels look like cell cycles. But we start with unsustainable wages. And those unsustainable wages cause us to work quite a bit. We also have thrown in staffing crisis guilt. So whether you're in a leadership role or a clinical role, we all feel a responsibility to make sure that our trucks are responding to medical emergencies in our communities and that our patients are well cared for. So we pick up those shifts, we work those hours. One of the things that I like to highlight in the industry is, if you transfer to another org, many times you're given just 2 weeks of PTO. And I had been in roles where I would start in a role and I would have 4 days off, and that was it for the year. 96 hours of PTO on a 24-hour rotation. I found that to be extremely rough during COVID, especially when you got sick. That was it. That was your PTO. And so we kind of push people into not being able to take time off. We may not have a good retirement match. We may not have good health insurance. And if we do, we may be paying $150 to $200 a month to keep our insurance. So there's some things that go into time and money scarcity. And what I just mentioned is contributing to that. So we're working all of this overtime. We're not really earning a wage that's sustainable and up with the market. Then we start missing the gym. We're not getting to the grocery store. We're not prepping our food. We're eating out all of the time. And we start to see that we're lacking the self-care that we would normally have. Our household duties fall short because we're always at work. And when we get home, we're exhausted. And then we start to suffer financially, physically, mentally. Our spiritual wellness starts to suffer because, well, when we're at work, we see some pretty dark things. And the systems are busy that we work in, so we may not be getting the breaks that we need. Then we start to see fatigue and burnout and poor decision making. So folks just are tired. And, anybody can debate whether 24-hour shifts are great or not. But when you're on a 24-hour shift, we are human beings. And at a certain point, we need to rest. And when people are not rested, they don't make good decisions. There's plenty of clinical research out there that is peer reviewed that demonstrates, the equivalent to alcohol levels and being intoxicated, people that have hallucinated while on the job because they were so tired. So we don't necessarily make the best decisions. We're unable to take that PTO because we may not have a good PTO balance. And then we start to demonstrate things like mood disturbances and anger. We may lash out while we're on shift. We may treat each other poorly. And then we come home and we're not sleeping well. And we're not able to eat nutritious foods because we didn't have the time. And you can see how this wheel just kind of gets a little more and more crazy as you move through it. So not sleeping well, we're eating at gas stations in the middle of the night when we catch a break. And our relationships start to suffer. We start to have a lack of social life. So joy leaves, enjoyment leaves. We're not relaxing because we need to make more money because we're not financially where we need to be. So, and in the center is all of these operational demands, station moves. We need you here. We need you there. We need you to answer the next call, the next call. And anybody that's worked in this industry for quite some time knows this can be a great deal of stress for anybody to handle. And when we're putting all of these components together, we, as leaders, we need to start looking at people as complex people. There are a lot of things going on that will create a bad attitude. Someone may not be showing up for work. There could be something going on in the background. Or maybe someone's overworking, but they're not providing quality because they're stressed financially. So the wheel of insanity is something to just consider and think about. Again, this was created in the back of an ambulance, and I was feeling a little bit of that wheel when I created this. So there is some peer-reviewed research out there that shows that social determinants of health, or what we call social needs, these are at risk for many of our EMS providers. And what this peer-reviewed research study shows is that EMS providers reported experiencing housing insecurity. 23% of the folks polled confirmed that. Food insecurity, struggles with substance use, mental health concerns, 41.5%. They were experiencing domestic violence at home. They had issues with healthcare affordability. 30% of our providers are worried about healthcare. Almost 90% of study participants screened positive for burnout. So this was a good sample study, by the way. And what was interesting that they found in their research is both women and EMT level providers were more likely than men and paramedics, respectively, to suffer from food and housing insecurity. So later in the presentation, I'll do a wage breakdown. I used more of an EMT wage to show just how difficult it is to live on that wage and why we may be seeing some of these social need risks. We have a responsibility as an industry to address some of this and make sure this isn't happening. So with that, culture is what we tolerate, and it is also what we celebrate. And so we need to really think about, what are we tolerating in any relationship? And also, what are we celebrating? I pulled this from a website a year or two ago, and it was celebrating Bob. And Bob was working an extreme amount of overtime, a 48-hour shift. And for many that are listening to this webinar, they're going to go, okay, lady, 48 hours is pretty common practice. But what's missing from this story is this was a large corporate entity, and Bob was in a very busy area. And 48 hours on a truck in that area is extreme. And I was a little bothered by the fact that we were celebrating that. So again, when I think about what we celebrate, I'm thinking we should be celebrating Bob taking a vacation, or Bob providing really good clinical care. But culturally, we need to think about, 12 hours may be enough. And I understand we don't have enough people to just split up a bunch of trucks, right? But I don't know that we should celebrate working 48 hours straight in a busy system. So when we create a wellness program, what are we thinking about? One of the keys to creating a good wellness program is knowing the audience. So what I would create at Uber, headquarters of Uber, right, versus ABC ambulance is going to be starkly different audience, different demographic, all of these different things. So I would even compare a rural EMS agency that is quite small, covers a large landscape, versus a very urbanized EMS agency in a different demographic area. These two agencies might have very different employee needs. So we need to think about who our employees are, where we are, and what kind of wellness program will land for our audience. Now, with that, this is one of my favorite studies to share. This is actually peer-reviewed research as well. And it talks about our personality traits. So sample size of EMS providers, they did deep research on the traits of EMS personnel, and they came up with a need to be in control. That came out as a personality trait. We're obsessive and compulsive. Yeah, there's some truth to that. Highly motivated by internal factors, action-oriented, high need for stimulation. We're easily bored. We're risk takers. We're rescue personalities. We're highly dedicated and we want to be needed. So when we think about, for example, what kind of exercise program you may want to create for this type of personality, because many of us fall into some resemblance of these buckets. Maybe yoga wouldn't be a good fit for many of our providers. Maybe high intensity workouts would be better. We need to have stimulation. We're action oriented. So this can kind of play into what you're designing and who your audience is. We also need to think about generations. We have over 5 generations in the workforce right now, and that creates a really interesting dichotomy of people that are coming together with differing beliefs and also very different experiences. So what's creating these different generations and the talk about the differences is the fact that each generation has had a different experience. And with those different experiences, their needs are different. So for example, millennials and Gen Zs, their number one top, this is a Gallup poll survey, by the way, their number one top need or want is employee well-being. And if you look at older millennials, the same, and then it kind of drops down a little bit. What's new for millennials and Gen Z that hasn't been seen before is the diversity and inclusiveness. So that's something that was new with these folks. But you can kind of see a running pattern of employees want to have wellness programs. And many of them, when you talk to your employees, they don't want the bucketed, like, okay, you have a health insurance plan, you go get a primary care visit, and we have this EAP and that's it. People are looking for more now from employers. They want to come to work, they want to feel well, and they want the workplace to support some of that. So oftentimes when I was growing up, I was told, treat them how you would want to be treated. And one of the things I've learned as a leader is you really want to treat them how they want to be treated. My experience coming up in EMS is vastly different than someone that's coming behind me and just getting started. So we need to often ask folks, what do you want? And yes, with multiple generations in the workforce, it can be a challenge, and we can't necessarily, or we might have a hard time creating a program that's a one size fits all, but it's really important that what our wants and needs are not the only things that are evaluated, and that we're really asking them what they want, because their needs and desires may be vastly different than what ours are. So people with poor well-being just don't serve customers as well. If you're tired in the middle of the night and you've been doing calls for 20 hours, that customer is less likely to get the top-notch care as the customer that experienced you in hour 1 and 2. And so when we look at the operational demands and the quality that we're providing, we need to think about, okay, are my employees well? And are they able to just come to work and think about work? They're not coming to work thinking about they didn't get any sleep. They're They're not coming to work thinking about how they can't make ends meet. They're not coming to work experiencing a spiritual crisis. They don't have physical ailments. They are coming to work and they're focused on work. That is when you're going to get the most productivity and efficiency out of your workforce, is they are well cared for, they are healthy, they are showing up, they feel safe, they feel supported. And one of the things that's not in this presentation that I think is extremely important is giving them the leadership skills that they need to have difficult conversations, to do the things that are maybe a little bit stressful in a meaningful way, so they don't create additional stress while they're at work. But I'm going to leave that alone because that's a whole nother presentation. So with that, there are the dimensions of wellness, and you've probably seen something similar to this out and about. So you've got your physical, intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, vocational, financial, and environmental. These all create what we call the wheel of life. So off to the right-hand corner, there is the wheel. And one of the things that we do in some of the courses that I offer is we evaluate our wheel. Okay, rate your physical wellness from 0 to 10. Rate your intellectual stimulation and your educational path 0 to 10. And you can connect the wheel, and you can see that the wheel to the left under surviving isn't quite filled as much, but the wheel on the right is filled much more, and that's a thriving individual. Will the wheel ever be perfectly filled? Not likely, right? We know that life is a give and take. We know that it can be out of balance. But again, as employers, when we take care of people, we need to think about, am I providing an environment where, you can grow professionally, where you can come here, maybe it's your ability to do some physical activity, or you're getting the motivation to do it while you're here. You have a safe environment. You like the people you work with, and you have a really cool social environment. Those things are really important. So what does wellness look like? Well, in my opinion, everybody in this picture looks relatively fit, right? She's got muscles, he's got muscles. She's taking care of a patient, but relatively fit. The firefighter, relatively fit. But what we don't know is my guy with the cat, he's extremely fit. He's smiling, he's really happy. But when he goes home at night, he's extremely depressed. And, his wife just left him. He's really struggling mentally with some of the calls he's experienced on shift, but nobody knows about this. So we need to think about what wellness looks like. And just because somebody's showing up fit and they're happy and they seem like they're, having a great time, we need to offer those resources to folks to say, I want to keep this quiet. I don't want my employer knowing I'm struggling, but I still need those resources that I can tap into in a confidential manner to handle whatever I'm going through without broadcasting it to my colleagues, peers, and or my leadership. So what does the EMS wellness funnel look like? Well, this funnel also was born in an ambulance. I started brainstorming this as well. And what does it look like? So culture and values, hands down, right? That contributes to almost everything. How you schedule people. Is there scheduling flexibility? There's lots of research showing that start times are really important. So a 6 a.m. start versus a 7 a.m. start, the 7 a.m. start is going to align more with the human's circadian rhythm. So are we mindful of just the human biology behind when we start our crews and when they get off? Sure, everybody's going to have a preference, and I think that we can engage staff in those decisions. But one of the things that I find when we create an EMS wellness funnel in an organization is that sometimes our personnel want things that are just unhealthy, period, right? If given the choice, they may just choose the unhealthy path. But we have a responsibility to create a healthy path and to reinforce that healthy path. So how you manage your trucks goes into the wellness funnel. Having a real-time system where you can look at what the demand is, what the usage is every day, and making sure that we can step in if things are just far too busy and we've had crews up for over 20 hours and they need a rest. Mental and physical health, call volume, which I just mentioned, nutrition, personal and professional growth, sleep. These things all contribute to the funnel. I'm sure you probably thought of one that's not in the funnel that should be in the funnel. There's probably much more to this funnel. But what are we putting in that funnel? So one of the things that I wanted to just briefly mention is wellness spans far beyond the conventional, eat your fruits and vegetables, make sure you get 8 hours of sleep a night. Spain now offers 3 to 5 days a month of paid leave for menstrual pain. And I'm bringing this up because as a woman and as a biologist, one of the key facts that we need to accept as a society and get kind of a little more comfortable discussing is there are changes as progesterone drops in your mood and how you feel. Women do experience cramping when they're on their cycle, right? So when you have to come to work and work in a high stress environment and you're going from call to call, being mindful of some of these things, I think, is really important. And maybe it's as simple as just having an open policy where there are feminine products places for employees and there is a support system if someone needs something. The research also showed that women in Spain share their cycle calendars. Wouldn't it be interesting to know when your boss is on their cycle and maybe that conversation is a little bit different. And you can also thoughtfully schedule your big presentations or when you travel. The other thing to consider that I wanted to bring up as well is menopause. So there are a couple articles floating around out there that are really great. I've been doing some reading on menopause in the workplace and the shame behind women that feel uncomfortable telling people when they're having an extreme hot flash. This is all biology. This is a natural cycle, but we're kind of embarrassed that we're having a hot flash or we're feeling a little bit moody because of the effect of menopause. And the same thing goes for men with low testosterone. The level of testosterone for men can fluctuate throughout life, and sometimes they'll experience a lower than normal testosterone level, which can also cause mood swings and fatigue. So, understanding our own bodies and being able to bring our whole selves to work involves understanding what these things are and how to address them in the workplace. Sure, not everybody's going to feel comfortable openly talking about it, but creating a support system where people can say, hey, I'm on my period today. I think I would rather do X versus Y. It could be a really good thing. It could prevent accidents. It could impact safety. And it also can impact performance. If you need someone to do a big pitch and they're just starting their cycle, that may not be the day to do a big pitch for a new market or have a really big presentation or meeting. So something just to consider. As I had said, I warned you in the beginning, this is a little bit of an unorthodox wellness presentation. So Delaware County EMS, really, really great EMS agency. They're doing really good work over there. They're located in Ohio. They're approaching wellness from multiple angles. They've published multiple studies and GEMS. That's where I got this data from. But they deployed exercise equipment at stations. They have a trainer and nutritionist. They provided mental health resources. They're approaching wellness from a holistic standpoint. And they also have incorporated accountability. You are expected when you come to work that you do 45 minutes of physical activity a day. And this goes from the top down. Leadership is also expected to do this. And then they have yearly physical ability screening, which I think is great. We need to make sure that we can crawl into spaces and bend down and that we're able to lift people up. It's a safety thing, and it's something to keep people motivated to keep on top of their physical fitness. So what they did that was really smart, in addition to the programming, is they measured. And we're going to talk about this as I give you some guidance on what to measure in your wellness program. But they measured injury rates. And what they found is pre and post, those injury rates went down. So I'm sure they've measured other metrics as well, but this is what was published, and it's really impressive. So when you utilize those funds for a wellness program, right? And you need to go to your board of commissioners or your board or whoever it is and report out on what you've utilized and why you've utilized it and impact. It is extremely important that we are measuring outcomes, and they did a really good job of that. That is an outcome. Another one could be sentinel events. How many sentinel events did you have where you not just injuries, but maybe it's some other type of accident of sorts because you're well. You could tie a few different components together here. So measuring outcomes, we're going to talk about in a little bit, but great program. People are doing good things out there, and this is one example of that. So the value of sleep, I could preach at us, all day about how important sleep is, but the truth is, it is really important. And we have lots of memes showing how, we have trouble sleeping or we're not sleeping. But human beings are the only species that deliberately deprives themselves of sleep. If you ever watch your dog knows when to sleep. They gleefully sleep. They're at ease when they sleep. But we tend to just drive ourselves to stay awake because we want to produce more. But really, in the end, we're just less productive. We need to sleep. So the other thing is that leaders that sleep are nicer. So sleep allows us to consolidate memories. If we don't sleep, we become forgetful. We can be moody. And oftentimes what we find with clinical research is folks that work in EMS that have trouble with managing their glucose levels, if they're kept up at night on a consistent basis, their glucose levels are less regulated. So there is science behind the body's natural ecosystem. And when we go against that, we can see other ramifications like the development and worsening of diabetes. The study showed that leaders that show up for work unrested are just more likely to be less patient with people. It makes sense, right? And we can be less charismatic when we haven't slept. So essentially, leaders that sleep are just downright nicer. If you haven't checked out Dr. Matthew Walker's work, I highly recommend it. Dr. Matthew Walker is the sleep diplomat. He wrote the book Why We Sleep, and he has some really great podcasts out there as well. But he's done really in-depth research. And forgive me, I know he's moved. I think he was at the University of Pittsburgh, but now he's at Yale or Harvard. I can't remember. I haven't looked in a minute, but he's doing some really good research. And one of the studies he did is he took two cohorts, so a group of perfectly healthy individuals, and he limited them to 6 hours of sleep per night for 1 week. So basically what happened is if you sleep 6 hours or less, what he found is gene dysregulation. So our bodies have genes and they express themselves, and they're supposed to express themselves in what we call a normal way, depending on the gene, right? So maybe it's a gene that influences your immune system. And instead of that gene protecting us and creating the B and T cells, or what we call our immune system cells, it actually does the reverse because we haven't slept, and it creates inflammation throughout the body. So 7 and 11 genes were distorted in their activity during 1 week of short sleep. Distorted, like not expressing themselves normally. This can lead to things like inflammation, decreased immune response, and cancer. So this is really important research, and it shows we need to sleep. And when you don't sleep, there are health consequences to not sleeping. I had the pleasure of attending the ambulance service manager course, and we did some research ourselves on fatigue. And what we found is that many organizations did not have a policy addressing fatigue. And we also found that many had dozed off while operating an ambulance, over 50%. So the question is, why do we do these things? Why do we work people to the point where they're dozing off? And it's not just our responsibility, of course. It is the clinical provider as well that needs to set a boundary and say, hey, I'm too tired, I can't drive. And I see that. So there are risks, and peer-reviewed research shows that fatigued EMS workers have a 2.2 greater odds of medical errors. Fatigued workers also have a 1.9 greater odds of injury and a 3.6 greater odds of safety compromising behavior. And again, it comes back to not being rested, not making those good decisions. Dozing behind the wheel is extremely dangerous. And then thinking about the critical versus low acuity calls. If we're sending people on critical call after critical call, that is going to fatigue them much quicker than a simple inter-facility type transport. So Dr. Matthew Walker says, the benefit of dream sleep is essentially a form of overnight therapy. It's during dream sleep where we start to actually take the sting out of difficult, even traumatic emotional experiences that we're having. And sleep almost divorces that emotional bitter rind from the memory experiences that we've had during the day. And so that we wake up the next morning feeling better about those experiences. So you can think of dream sleep as emotional first aid, and it sort of offers this nocturnal soothing balm that smooths those painful stinging edges of difficult experience. So it's not time that heals all wounds, but it's time during dream sleep that provides you that emotional convalescence. So I read this quote out loud because it is exactly what we need as clinical providers in EMS. We need to divorce the bitter rind. We experience traumatic events during the day on many of our calls, and our providers need to sleep. If you've ever heard of the 24-hour rule in leadership, if something really difficult happens or you don't know how to address something, you give it a day, you sleep on it. And in the morning, you have more clarity about that. So, sleep is essential for quality clinical providers, and it's really essential for human performance at any level in an organization. So, as you know, how much you sleep, 7 to 9 hours. That's what the National Sleep Foundation says. So this video I'm going to play, I did not notice until a couple days ago, my seatbelt's not on, and that is not okay. But in my defense, we were actually driving around a parking lot, if that makes you feel better. But this is the introduction to nutrition.
So, well, we had lots of caffeine today and we were doing good, and we realized we took too much caffeine and now we feel tired. And it's 3 o'clock. No, it's 4 o'clock. So we're gonna, too close. We're going to do the cardinal sin of EMS and go get food, because I didn't bring my food with me. It's at the station, which is quite a ways away. And I'm probably going to eat something that I shouldn't be eating. And yeah, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, so sounds familiar, right? And so as someone in a leadership position, discussions about, well, what does that look like? So I had a personal responsibility to take my food with me, but that day I had this very hopeful idea that we were just going down the street and we would come back, and we didn't. And so that was foolish, right? So I had made that mistake. However, as an agency, one of the things that I've been talking about quite a bit too, and we toy around with some ideas of how do we provide food to crews, in a space where when they get in a pinch like that, they're not going to go to the ED and grab cookies, right? So what is it? Is it putting a little bit of a protein bars and fruits in cabinets of ambulances, maybe? Or it is food boxes that are delivered to stations? Sure, I understand that there's a financial cost to this. That is definitely not something that I haven't considered, but it does kind of beg the question is, okay, if we're really focused on wellness and taking care of people, what can be done? What can we do? And how can we prevent some of this bad behavior that plays out? Energy drinks, I don't know what it is about EMS and energy drinks. My previous role, I was working for a state office and I was working from home, and I don't think I drank an energy drink at all. And then as soon as I got back out here, it is just a thing. I try to avoid them, but there are some days where I really just want one. And I think it is just the high intensity work that we do. And it's also kind of a culture thing. So, but they're not great for us. And they do cause us later, many of them cause us to crash. They dehydrate us. There's not a lot of good that can come out of energy drinks, but anybody that knows me knows that like a Bang energy drink is just incredible. It's one of my favorites. It's caffeine, right? And we love caffeine, but it can get to a point where we abuse it. And so providing that education to our crews on, hey, you can get addicted to this, you can start to abuse it, and it's not super great for you, might be fruitful. It might be something that's a good education piece for folks. So let's see if I can get to the next slide here. There we go. So nutrition. This is also a peer-reviewed journal article. I think I found this one in EMS1. So 48% of us are classified as overweight, 35% obese, 78% of fire and EMS personnel rated their dietary well-being at below average, 84% admit to consuming prepackaged foods or fast food items, 57% of respondents consume one alcoholic beverage a day, and 23% consumed more than two. That's a little concerning. We're probably consuming the alcohol to kind of, relax us to go to bed at night. But what the research shows is alcohol completely disrupts REM sleep. So if you have something big going on the next day, or you just need to perform at a high level, it is really easy to, and this is oftentimes what gets me is, you're out, you're networking with folks and you have a speaking gig in the morning, or you have a big meeting in the morning where you need to perform, but you're out and you're being social and you want to have that cocktail. If you have that cocktail, you are going to not sleep as well. You are going to prevent yourself from getting into that deep REM sleep. So it's really important that even though it feels like it's calming you down and you get to sleep quickly because you've had a drink or two, it is not getting you into deep REM sleep. You're going to wake up likely feeling more fatigued than you would if you had not had that beverage. So it's really important that we consider, when we look at human performance and wellness, consider the ramifications of having that glass of wine, having that cocktail, that old fashioned or whatever it is. It will impact your sleep whether you realize it or not. So more research looking at eating patterns among EMS providers. And some of this is no surprise, but it's good to see that it was researched and that we know what's actually going on here. So what influences folks and how they eat? Your partner has a huge influence on you. So if you are working with someone that is constantly eating fast food and junk food, you are much more likely to follow suit, right? It's kind of like that saying, like, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around, right? So culturally, who we hire, who we bring on board, and who is surrounding you as a colleague is going to be important when it comes to your overall eating patterns. Operational demands. If you're just nonstop and you get to the point where you're so hungry you can't think, you're going to grab the first thing that you can get, right? Fatigue. Anytime you're tired, you are going to crave higher fat foods and higher carbohydrate foods. Just fact, right? This is a scientifically backed fact. So you're going to be more likely to have a Subway's taquito than you are to grab a salad. So it's really important to be rested. Time scarcity. You're just in a pinch and you need to grab something. There's no food available. Maybe you work nights and the only thing open is McDonald's. Well, you didn't bring your food. You have nothing to eat. There's nothing at the station. You're either going to hit a gas station or you're going to hit fast food. Night shifters tended to not eat as well. And I think that's just because it was attributed to less options. And then unsupportive management, in the sense that management wasn't getting these folks to a place where they could get food, or they were, being overutilized. That's what that means. So it's really important that, again, when we look at the influencers and we think about our operation, okay, if I fatigue someone, they may do this. If they don't have time, they may do that. Okay, how can we look at these influencers and start to mitigate some of those influencers to create a healthier, higher performing workplace? And this may also apply, again, I know we may have some leaders on this webinar. This may apply to you as well. You're in the office, you still have to perform at a high level. So how can you mitigate some of this to create a higher performance from yourself? So how we eat matters. And one of the things that's really interesting is our microbiome. So there's been lots of research in the last 20 some years on the microbiome. Again, I had mentioned in my first career, I was involved in molecular biology, teaching molecular biology, doing research. And one of my research projects was looking at microbiome. And the bacteria that live inside of our gut, so our small and large intestine, is extremely diverse. There are trillions of them. And they produce things for us, such as vitamins, for example, or byproducts that create inflammation. They assist with digestion. There is a whole ecosystem within our body that we need to influence in a good way. What has research shown? Research shows that folks that eat more of a plant-based diet have a healthier microbiome, a more diverse microbiome than folks that eat prepackaged foods and also meat eaters. So I'm kind of bummed about that because I do enjoy a good steak. But what they say is that folks that overconsume red meat tend to kind of decrease the diversity of the microbiome. And the diversity gets kind of slanted into the bacterium that create a lot of inflammation. And it's a balancing act. This is how they explain the microbiome. there's a balance, and what you eat can shift that balance. And once that balance is shifted, you're going to have some negative effects, just like anything else in the body when you disrupt an ecosystem. So highly packaged foods are a big problem, especially over in the US. I was just on a plane the other day coming back from the Netherlands, and I made a poor decision and asked for Diet Coke. And they told me, like, we don't even have Diet Coke. Like, it is not okay to have this in our country. We don't have it. And I thought, oh, yeah, I mean, it's not great for you. But in the US, we tend to eat a lot of really highly packaged foods. They're not super great. The other thing I want to mention too, because we're trying to create this high performing environment, is so we want to help our employees create a healthy microbiome. And another ancillary effect of eating lots of fruits and veggies, a lower fat, less, and when I say lower fat, I mean like less saturated fats, because there are lots of healthy fats out there. But this will help us diversify that microbiome, and it actually influences our mental health as well. So byproducts, dopamine, serotonin, our microbiome actually influence these. So the other thing too to think about is when you respond to a call, your digestive enzymes are actually less active from your salivary glands. So as you're eating your food and you're highly stressed because you're going to a call, your digestive process is going to actually be negatively affected. It is important that we sit still. We're in a calm environment when we eat our food to really get all the nutrients and macronutrients out of our food. I know it sounds super nerdy, but it is really true. And then the last thing that I want to highlight, which I think is really interesting, is nutrition and aggression. So 231 prisoners over 142 days. What did they do? They gave a sector of the prisoners a placebo, and the other sector, they gave them a vitamin, mineral, and essential fatty component. So what they found is those that were getting the minerals and vitamins and the fatty acids had a 35% reduction in disciplinary incidences versus the group that got the placebo. And they repeated this study multiple times. And what they found is that when you have a low level of omega fatty acids, so vitamin D and zinc, you are more aggressive. So again, it comes back to, are we getting the nutrients we need? Are we healthy? It will influence our mood. It will influence how we perform, and we will be happier in the end if we're doing nutrition well. So with that, I'm going to play this trailer. I don't know if any of you have seen Asphalt City, but this is a really, really intense movie. And let's see if we can get it to play. So before I hit play, this is all about mental health. And the reason I put this blurb in our presentation today is I want to really convey how important it is that we talk about and we educate our clinical providers and our leadership team members on the dark side. There's a dark side to this job, and I think we need to be sure that we start having these conversations early. I did watch Asphalt City. I did find that I was kind of watching something that reminded me of my loss of innocence. I think there is a certain loss of innocence when you get into this field and you start to experience a lot of what goes on behind the scenes in life. And there is a positive ending to this movie, but there's also a tragic ending. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give it away. I highly recommend watching it. And I do think that there's a place in education for this. I think taking snips from this movie could be highly impactful in the classroom. So I'm going to play the trailer for you. Maybe. Or maybe not. Oh. There we go. Nope. Okay, so we may not be able to play the trailer, but I highly recommend you check the trailer out when you get a moment, and potentially watch the movie and consider bringing this into your classroom, bits and pieces. Not all of it may resonate with you, but it's definitely, it's a good movie. They did a lot of research. They used real clinical providers to create a lot of the content. So I highly recommend it. So I said we were going to talk about wages quickly. So this is roughly what an EMT wage is. You might make a little bit more depending on where you're at in the country, but I wanted to outline this. So we talked about social needs and how our providers are experiencing things like food insecurity and housing insecurity, which sounds shocking, right? So you take a provider, they're making $18 per hour, they're working a 56-hour work week. There's your pay per week, right? You take out taxes, you take out retirement, you take out healthcare benefits, $300 per week for childcare, and then we have a problem. So we only have $500 left. Well, that's not going to work. So you haven't paid your rent, you haven't bought groceries. We definitely have a problem. So I put in childcare to be really clear on what I'm trying to convey here. If we don't consider the wage and folks, starting young in this industry, they are inevitably going to start a family at some point, right? And they may become a single parent at some point. So we need to be mindful of that. And so I'm constantly thinking about that. The same with scheduling, can we support a single parent that needs to get off at a certain time to go pick up their child, right? We may be missing a sector of the workforce by not offering these schedules, but we also need to be sure that we are paying enough that they are not thinking about money when they're coming to work. They're thinking about work, right? They're coming to work whole and well, and they're not stressed. So back to the wheel, just as a reminder. And then what we need to look at when it comes to financial earnings. So the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has these two figures. And I will say that I don't know that that is the most accurate depiction because the Bureau of Labor and Statistics doesn't take all of the components of how we work and the hours we work into account when they come up with these numbers. This is from last year. I'm sure this wage is a little bit higher, but again, it kind of paints the picture. Median income for an EMT, $35,000 a year. Paramedic, $46,000 a year. Well, what is a good annual living wage? Now, again, these are numbers from last year. So these need to be a little bit higher this year because as we know, there's inflation. So Michigan, 67,000. And by the way, when they took these numbers into account, this is for a dual income household, not a single income household. Kentucky, $63,000, US median, 67,000. We're not even close in a lot of places. And this is part of how we contribute to folks just being unwell. If your base wage is 46, you've got to work a whole lot of overtime to get to a living wage. And people are stressed. Globally, we find that satiation, and this is from last year, occurs at around 95,000. However, I would challenge that and say not in California, not in New York, but in Michigan, sure. Yeah, I think that's a good living wage for Michigan. So we need to think about that financial piece when we build programs and we bring people in. So the best use of money is to take the issue of money off the table, right? Effective organizations compensate people in amounts and in ways that allow individuals to forget about compensation and instead focus on the work itself. This is from Daniel Pink. The human element, so when we look at our operational demands, because remember that was in the center of the wheel of insanity, we have to understand and think about mindful scheduling. Are people getting off on time? Is there some crazy rule that if a call drops 5 minutes before your off time, it's your call and you're held over for 3 hours? Most people won't sustain that for very long because they have family obligations and it's a respect thing. They want to be able to go home at a reasonable hour. They don't need to be held over for 3 hours for an inner facility. Everybody understands 911s, but it's amazing how many corporations still practice this. Are we putting the customer first or are we putting the provider first? So being mindful of off times and workload. You need an on-demand system where you can look at how busy have my crews been? Who's in trouble? Who's been overutilized? How can I redistribute call volume? How can I create a culture of safety? If you're in a rural system, it's long transports, right? So you're still having that utilization factor. How can we be safe about it? And how can we keep people healthy and rested? So I'm going to skip over this slide because we are running close on time. I want to get into the pillars of an effective workforce wellness program. So in order to develop a good workplace wellness program, you've got to have the leadership engaged. So top tier leadership need to be completely on board with this. There needs to be some financial backing with this. And it needs to align, again, with your audience. Who are your employees and what do they want? So we need to think about, okay, I'm ABC Ambulance. What's my mission? What are my values? What is my cultural belief? And the wellness program needs to align with that. If you are an organization that wants all your employees to be extremely physically fit, then there should be some kind of requirement for that, right? So it really comes back to your values, your belief, your mission statement, your value statement. And then scope, relevance, and quality, right? So how robust do you want it to be? And at what quality level do you want it to be? What kind of financial support do you have? Because you might be confined to just certain areas. You might have to take small bites. It needs to be accessible to all. So as you look at your workforce and you create a program, there needs to be accessibility. If I need a resource, if I'm having a mental health crisis, how do I get it? And where do I go to get it? And is it accessible to me in a way that I find it, that I approve? Can you form partnerships? So oftentimes you can form partnerships with some local businesses. Maybe there's a huge gym discount. Maybe there's free gym equipment. Maybe there's free nutritional coaching. What are those partnerships that you can partner up with and utilize the resources that are in your community? And then are you communicating the wellness program? Many organizations will launch this robust wellness program and then forget to communicate all of the benefits that the employees could potentially have. If the employees don't know how to take advantage of the benefits, they may not utilize them. And then when you pull your metrics, they may not be so great. And then your wellness program could fall flat and it may not be approved for the following year when it comes to funding. And the key part is measured outcomes. So we're going to talk about what can you measure, because this is extremely important. You saw the example from Delaware County EMS and what they were highly focused on. So here are some other examples of what you can measure. Definitely utilization, right? How many people enrolled? Then did they participate in your program? So what is your participation rate? Depth of participation. So depending on what you've built, right? Let's say you do a class series where you've, invested in yoga training, or maybe it's just a stretch and flex class, or it's massage, or whatever it is. How many times did each participant come? What is the overall percentage usage rate? Really what you're measuring there, right, is return on investment. And then longevity. So when you look at who comes into the wellness program and you look at the employment period, are the people that are coming into the programs and employed with you staying with your organization? So are people leaving the organization or are they staying? Employee satisfaction, are they happy with what they're getting? Health risk status, again, coming back to, do they have chronic conditions? Have we decreased their chronic conditions? Have we decreased the utilization of some of their health insurance? Have we decreased their healthcare and pharmaceutical costs as well? Because again, if we're getting people healthier and fitter and maybe mentally more well, they may need to utilize their healthcare less. And the reality is that will cost the company less. What are your workers' compensation costs prior to and after the start of your wellness program? Did you see a decrease in the use of workers' comp? Okay, that's a good thing. Safety incidences. So maybe you're measuring or deploying out some fatigue programming, right? And you want to address fatigue, and you notice over that year, your safety incidences have decreased. Well, that's because people are well rested and they're not having accidents. Absenteeism and presenteeism. So this is an interesting one. So definitely, when people call in, you could measure that all day. Most of us have platforms where we can pull that data. But presenteeism is actually sending out a survey and asking specific questions. Do you feel engaged in your work? Are you happy here? You can measure those things. And what you might find is pre and post, the presenteeism might increase. If we're getting well, we may be happier, which means we may be more present. Trust and management, coming back to that whole leadership thing. If you are coming to work and you feel a high level of trust and you feel very invested and safe and supported, you are going to be healthier. So trust within the workplace, extremely important. You can measure it and you can address it within your wellness program as well. And again, I mentioned voluntary turnover versus how long they stay. The same thing as saying longevity. And longevity can mean longevity just in the wellness program itself as well. Willingness to recommend the employer to others. Again, safety, pride, all of these things. Are they proud of where they work? Would they bring other people in? So, what is the ROI for wellness programs? You're going to attract top talent. If you start something in your area that no one else is doing and you raise the bar, people talk. The word on the street gets around. People want to come work for you. It contributes to longevity and reduced turnover. Healthier people just stay longer, they're more efficient, and they're more productive. And they're happier at their jobs. If you're able to get away and exercise, if you're able to take that nap and get some rest, you're just going to be happier and you're going to be more satisfied with your job. And again, as I mentioned, increased productivity. So there's lots of research out there showing Johnson & Johnson kind of led the way when it came to wellness programs. They cumulatively saved the company $250 million over the last decade. Now, granted, Johnson & Johnson is a very large company, but it's something to think about, right? Every dollar invested produces a return on investment of $4 in better health and work performance. So there should be an ROI when you invest in a wellness program. So how do you start? Well, assess where you're at, launch work groups, start forums, start having the conversation, and just take small bites. If you have a limited amount of funding or time, just do something small and trial it and see how it goes. You might have internal talent. Maybe you have a personal trainer that already works for you, and you could strike some kind of agreement with them where you hire them and it's at a reduced rate, right? It needs to come from top down. So we have to lead by example. Everybody in the organization needs to be invested, and we need to hire experts to assist. So maybe that is somebody coming in and kind of saying, hey, I've developed this wellness program. Let me show you how I've done it. And then don't forget to measure. We've got to have our data and exercise an entrepreneurial spirit. Have fun with this. Build a program that is unmatched, that's different than anything anybody's seen. And it may take a few trials and tribulations. You may fail at first, or a program may fall flat, and then you just need to pivot and make some adjustments. But a lot can be done in the wellness space. So, will you lead this change? This is my contact info. I thank you for joining, and I'm open to questions.
Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. If you could please either use the Q&A, which is represented by the double dialogue bubble button, or the simple chat, Andrea will be able to see questions in either location.
So PS, for some reason, I cannot see the chat, so I may need you to read them to me, if that's okay.
No problem. I think we're a few minutes over, and it is EMS week, so I think people are bouncing, but you're just getting some compliments in the chat, thanking you for a great presentation and for sharing such helpful content. So I think we're actually okay to close the session right now. And Andrea, again, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your research with the AAA and Women in Emergency Services audiences. We truly appreciate your time and thought, and we hope to see everyone else on a future webinar in the near future. We will be posting a recording of this session to our website within the next 48 hours. It is also live on Facebook right now.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care and happy EMS week.
Happy EMS week.